Good evening and welcome back to the Weekend Primetime. We're going to begin this hour with Trump's Justice Department battling allegations that it has been cataloging the search history of lawmakers who were able to view unredacted Epstein files this week. It comes as a trio of House Democrats sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi demanding that the Justice Department stop what they called spying on Congress members reviewing unredacted Epstein files. In the letter, Congresswoman Jayapal and Congressman Raskin and Garcia called the surveillance a blatant violation of the separation of powers and, quote, further evidence that this DOJ will stop at nothing to protect Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's co-conspirators, accomplices, and enablers while denying justice to survivors and the American people. The explosive letter comes after the combative hearing with Bondi this week, where she was photographed with a record of Congresswoman Jayapal's search history of the unredacted Epstein documents. The piece of paper was literally titled Jayapal Pramila Search History. Jayapal confronted Speaker Johnson about the situation. Look at this.
I did confirm to him that was my search history, that she had it in the binder, that there was a photograph of it, that it matched what I searched, and that it was unacceptable.
I don't think it's appropriate for anybody to be tracking that, so I will echo that to anybody involved with the DOJ, and I'm sure it was an oversight. That's my guess.
The new revelations come as survivors continue pushing for accountability over the crimes of Epstein and his accomplices. And during Bondi's hearing, a powerful moment with survivors in attendance became a flashpoint for how far that justice feels for those who've been abused. Watch.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand. Attorney General Bondi, you apologized to the survivors in your opening statement for what they went through at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through with the absolutely unacceptable release of the Epstein files and their information?
Congresswoman, you sat before Merrick Garland sat in this chair twice.
Attorney General Bondi,
no, can I finish my answer?
No, I'm going to reclaim my time.
I'm not going to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
And Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal joins us now. She serves on the House Judiciary, Foreign Affairs, and Budget Committees. Congresswoman, thanks for coming back on the show. So much to dig into there. I actually want to go back to what we heard Speaker Johnson say there when he seemed to suggest, when asked by a reporter there in the hallway, that this was probably, inappropriate, but probably just an oversight. Is that how you see it? The fact that your search history ended up there for all to see?
No, definitely not. It's not an oversight. I've spoken with him twice now. Look, I think that they are deliberately searching, saving the searches of, and then printing out the searches of members of Congress to use against them in hearings. This is surveillance, and it's utilization of that surveillance to try to attack members of Congress who are legitimately allowed to look at all of these documents without being spied on. And I think Mike Johnson knows that. I know that from my conversations with him. I think that it's very unusual for him to say this and criticize the Department of Justice, I'll say, but it is so egregious. And I believe that Republicans and Democrats know that. So we are continuing to pursue, first of all, an end to the practice of spying and surveilling members of Congress. And, that means a whole new process for how we get to search and what they, essentially saying they are not allowed to track any of that. It also, though, requires them to answer a bunch of questions, requires Pam Bondi to answer a bunch of questions that I have, which we put in the letter that we just sent her. How many members are they surveilling? Did they keep that search history for every single one of us? How many of them is that? And also, why did they do it? Why did she come in? Look, that search history required staff to not only save the search history, but then to go back and summarize what the search history was. Because if you look at that picture, it has the document number that I searched by, and then a summary of what the email was. And I was in there for about 2 hours. So that document is stapled because there are a number of pieces of paper in there. And I want to know also, how was she going to use it against me? I don't care what, there's nothing in there that I want to hide about my searches, but she was going to use that to try and attack me. That is completely inappropriate, instead of answering the questions of why she's covering up this entire scandal and redacting the wrong information of powerful predators and then not redacting the information of survivors.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember, Congresswoman, when Republican lawmakers voted to give themselves financial recourse because they were so mad that their phone records were being subpoenaed. But that's neither here nor there. I did want to ask you about that very powerful moment during the hearing when you asked Pam Bondi to apologize to the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, and she refused to look them in the face as they raised their hands, indicating that they had not heard from the DOJ. Have you been in touch with the survivors, and are there any updates as to whether any of them have been contacted by the Department of Justice to tell their story and to be interviewed, presumably, about what's in those files or what's been left out?
Catherine, that moment still gives me chills. When I watched it, I felt chills again because it was a very, very powerful moment. And I worked very closely with the survivors ahead of time. I didn't want them to be a prop in this. I wanted to know what it was that they wanted from her in being there, because that in itself is a very courageous thing to do, to sit in that room and essentially listen to her basically re-traumatize them by refusing to offer an apology, by refusing to even engage on a human level with them, to just turn around and apologize to them. So I was ready, and I had told them, listen, if I ask you to stand, that's why I said, if you're willing and you don't feel like it, please don't stand. This is about you and protecting you. I have spoken to them since, and my obviously not all of them, but my understanding is that they have not received any outreach from the Department of Justice. And I think it just, look, I knew that I was in a way tossing her a softball by offering her the opportunity to turn around and apologize to them. If she had taken it, it would have been a very powerful moment. And I would have said, this is a very powerful moment for the country to see you apologize. And will you now agree to meet with them? But she didn't take it in that way at all. She was performing for an audience of one. And the really awful criminal thing, and I do think it's criminal in the greater scheme of things, is that there is a criminal ring here of predators and pedophiles that has systematically abused, raped, groomed, assaulted young girls as young as 9, 10. When you look through those files, it is impossible not to have those emails haunt you. And instead of being responsive to that and being the people's lawyer, she disrespected them. She told them what people have been telling them for the last 20, 30 years in some cases. Shut up, sit down, be silent. We are not going to do anything about this. And furthermore, we're going to try to intimidate you by releasing the names of survivors in opposition to the law and to what the Department of Justice should be doing to protect them.
Congresswoman, I want to shift quickly to the shutdown. Funding for DHS expired at midnight, and the only thing is it's already so funded, ICE and CBP, that it's not going to make that much of an impact on their current operations. What are you and other Democrats going to hold out for in the name of concrete reform and change? And do you worry that this is going to put stress on other parts of DHS that are unrelated to Trump's immigration crackdown?
Well, we've been very clear, Elise, about our demands. Look, ICE needs to get out of Minnesota, but also other cities across the country. We don't want them just pulling out ICE and CBP agents from Minnesota and then sending them elsewhere. We need to make sure that there are no more warrantless arrests, and that is not only at the doors, which is constitutionally prohibited, to bash down somebody's door without a judicial warrant, but also all of this arrests that are being made on the street, people being dragged out by their hair, stopped because of how they look or what language they speak. That has to stop. We need judicial warrants there as well. And we need a change to how these folks are not identified. We need them to not have masks and to, make sure they are wearing identifying information and that they are prosecuted. So there's a number of things that we've listed. Right now, 73,000 immigrants are being incarcerated in for-profit facilities every single day, including children. There have been a number of reports about the children that are being incarcerated in these facilities against the law. And so that needs to end. That's going to be our next accountability hearing that we do on the Immigration Subcommittee in my series of accountability hearings. There's a set of demands there. We've been very clear about it. If Republicans want to shut down the government and DHS because they refuse to follow the Constitution, judges' orders, and want ICE and CBP to continue murdering people on the streets with no accountability, that is on them. But we're gonna use the little bit of leverage we have to really hold out for these kinds of major reforms.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, thank you.